Okay, welcome back. So we'll talk about extending this linked list project a little bit further, and I don't want to put too much into this video, but today we're going to talk about file I/O and changing our design slightly, tweaking our design, and making use of helper classes or methods or extra classes with methods contained in them that we can call from our GUI to get work done. Okay, the sort of work we need to get done. Okay, so quick talk about some emails. So Hello World or Norsal said to me, hello, can you please show me in a video if we have some code written in a different class and each class has like a feature that adds on the GUI. Suppose I want to add a new class and some more features. How can I link those things in to each other so that I can run this new class and I'll get all the previous stuff working with the new class. Also, I'm having trouble in making the buttons work like when implementing it with an action listener. Okay, so getting buttons working with an action listener, I might refer, well, we'll cover it quickly anyway, okay. But yeah, so this is all about getting other classes that can do some of the processing for you and calling those methods from the GUI class, for example, or from buttons, for example. Okay, so that was about 2 days ago or a day ago that came through that email. And then there was another one, and from Kenny Tafili. Hi, nice video, but can I make data to save after I close the app? So on file I/O, okay? So helper class and some file I/O, these sort of things go together. So I thought, oh, well, I'll do another video. And I don't get many comments on my videos, maybe one or two a month, if that. And I get very low views. So when someone looks at my videos and appreciates it, wow, I think, wow, that's great. So I don't mind spending a few hours of my time, 5 hours of my time to help some other people out. That's what we're going to do today. So if you want to join in, and let's get going. So we're going to build on the existing code that we got for the linked list project, and we'll add some extra features in, and we'll add some helper methods in. Okay, I hope that's clear. Let's go. Okay, so here's my GitHub page for the project, and the link's in the description, of course. So all you need to do, you don't need to worry about knowing GitHub. It's not complicated. Okay, all you do is come into the little drop down here and click download zip. Okay, download zip, and then it will download to your downloads folder on your machine. And all you need to do then is move that into a new folder where you want to work on your Java projects. Okay, so here's the file I've downloaded, and I've moved it into a new folder. I've moved it into my C:\Java /linked lists, whatever you want to call the folders, doesn't matter. Just create a new folder, and then you extract it. And you can use the Windows extract. I'll get this so you can see it in the. Got to get it so you can see it in the video. And so I've got 7-zip installed, which is a great little free 7-zip zip tool. Or else you can just go extract here using the Windows built-in zip file manager. That's fine as well. Both do the same thing. And I'll go extract here. Okay. If it creates a subfolder, you don't necessarily want a subfolder, so I'm going to move all those back into that prior folder. So I'm just going to drag them and drop them in the prior folder where the zip file is. Okay. And then I can delete that. So it's created a whole bunch of files here, and some of these are zip files. So these ones here are all zip files, and they're at the various stages that we got to in the first video. So after video 1, after video 2, after video 3, and so on. So these are all parts of the videos that I've done already. So we don't need those, and I don't need that master zip anymore. That's the code I've just downloaded, that one there. So I'll delete all those zip files. Just get everything down to the simplest possible code. Okay. So that leaves us our files as we were at the end of our last video, which is into part 4, really. Okay. Okay, so let's just reintroduce ourselves to the code, do a quick recap. So we'll look at the student email class there, and it's got 2 private fields, 2 private instance fields, name and ID, a default constructor, a parameterized constructor. Okay, so we can pass in data and have it initialize according to our class data fields. Some accessor methods, get name and get ID, some mutator methods, which change class data, set name and set ID, and a simple toString method. Okay, so pretty basic stuff. And then we've got the exception class that we created in our video on user inputs validation, the best way to do that. And so it's just a class where we can throw our own exceptions and have those dealt with in the main program, the GUI. Okay. And then the other one is the GUI class, and this is what does all the work. Okay, so it extends JFrame, so it's creating a GUI, a Windows GUI application. And there's our various GUI components there. Our main storage is our linked list object. And student email, our constructor for building the GUI user interface. And we've got various panels and things and labels and text fields getting added to panels, just like we saw in the earlier videos. Okay, then we've got an isStudent in linked list method, and we can pass it an ID and see if the student's in the linked list or not. And add student, we'll add a student to the linked list. Okay, so we're creating a student and adding them to the linked list here. Okay, and then delete student. We try and find a student in the linked list, and if we find it, we remove it. Okay, remove from the linked list. So we try and find one where the IDs match. And an edit student where we're editing a student. Okay, and so we're updating the details. So if the ID changes or the name changes or whatever, we can create the update the details. Okay, and so this is where we kick off the editing here. And when the user's finished, click another button. That's when the edit save fires off, and that saves our student details back into the linked list. Okay, so all we need to do is update the details in the linked list. Okay, so whatever the edit index is, we get the student of that edit index out location in the linked list, and we just set their name to the new name, and we get and we set their ID to the new ID, whatever that might be. Okay, so pretty basic stuff. We did all this in prior videos. We're just doing a quick recap now, and a recap for me too, because I haven't seen this code for a few years. Okay, it's probably been a few years since I did the last video. So, and then I've got a test data button there for adding test data, just for testing. Things like that help. A display all just displays all the data into a text area by getting those details, calling this the toString method. It does it implicitly here. We don't have .toString, but we could have added .toString. It would have done the same thing. Java's looking for a text representation of each student, so it's automatically looking for and calling this toString method here. Okay, we talked about all this in prior weeks. Exit application and a simple main method there just to create our main frame and make it visible and set the size and things. Okay, so into this now we want to add, we might even start by, to addressing the questions, we might even start by just making our design better, okay, so that we can, a good design, let's just create a new a file here and we'll talk about it. Okay, so a good design, you'll hear about things when you get into programming more. I know we're only introductory at the moment, we're only very introductory programming. But later on when you get into coding, you'll start hearing about things like model view controller. And there's many variations on that as well, okay? So the model view controller is all about putting all the code that's to do with the user interface or to do with the data. So that's where your data classes are. So for example, in our example here, student email would be the class here. That's our data class. Okay. And then the view is all the things that do with creating the view. In other words, the user interface. Okay, so user interface. And that's certainly our code in our student email GUI. Okay. Okay, and then we've got a controller. What's the controller then? If we covered everything already, what's the controller? Okay, so this is where the main work should happen. That's where that should happen. And at the moment, our design's a bit confused because we've got all that inside our student email GUI as well. So we might look at streamlining things a bit better and making it more into a model view controller class or model design, even though it's more advanced than what we've done so far. Okay, so a game I like to play. Well, it's not really a game. It's a sort of a little quiz, I suppose. What code should go where? Okay, so if you got a GUI class which is responsible for building your GUI, okay, and if you've got a data class which is responsible, for example, for storing a student's details, okay, so you've only got okay, and you've got an array or processing, so array or linked list plus processing. So if you had those three classes, okay, and you wanted to split up your code into each part, which code's responsible for the GUI? Well, it's obviously that one, isn't it? Responsible for your GUI, so things like buttons, labels, and so on. Okay, so that's responsible for all that sort of stuff. Which of those classes is responsible for your data? And it's obviously the data class, isn't it? So data, pretty good so far. And if you had an array or a linked list and processing to do with linked lists, like editing a value in a linked list or adding a value to the linked list or whatever, that would all go in here, wouldn't it? So add, edit, delete. If you had to save the data to file and load it from file, that would all be done here as well. Save and load from file. Okay. If you had to do some validation, so that your data was being validated before you added it, before you could create a student, where would that go? Would it go here? Not really. That's not responsible for the data. It doesn't know what valid data is. This is a data class, so it knows about what should be valid data. So your mutator methods and your constructors, if you're doing this for a real application, would all enforce validation rules. For example, student name cannot be blank. Student ID must be 8 digits. It can't be 7 or 9 digits, or it can't contain any letters. So even in a simple project like this one, we've still got data rules. We're not enforcing them yet, maybe, but if this is a real application, you would have data rules. And that's why you've got mutator methods and constructors in your classes, rather than just making everything public so that everything can change anything, because you're enforcing the rules. Okay. And even for simple projects, it's important. But when you get onto real applications where there's people's data involved and money involved, you've got to be super, super careful. Make sure your rules are enforced. So that's why you make your data private inside a data class. So if there's validation rules, they're enforced here. Okay. And that's sort of a good way to break down your code. And we're going to move to this design now. Okay. So that we can have the helper class that one of the requests was talking about, and we'll add the save and load to file into one as well. Okay. So we're going to have a GUI class. We're going to have our exception class. That's just going to stay the same. We'll have our data class, which is our student email class, and we're going to add a fourth class, which is going to be our processing class, or our controller, or what do we call it? We might even call it the linked list processor or something like that. I don't know. What's a good name? Doesn't matter. Okay. We want to just call it controller for now. That's where all our processing goes. Okay. Now the idea with this design is, what happens if you move your application from being a GUI application to being a web application? So instead of being a GUI app running on a computer, it's running in a web server. What would you need to change out of all of this code? It should really just be a GUI class, okay? Because it knows about the user interface. So if you move your application from being a Windows application to a web application, this is where most of your change is going to be. Okay. What about if you change it so instead of saving and loading data from file, you're saving and loading data to a database? Okay. What would need to change? And the answer is only this would need to change. Nothing else you need to change. Really, just those methods. It's where you're saving and loading data from. So you can see with this design, this is a model view controller, MVC, or model view controller design. Each of your classes has got a very specific function, very, very, very clearly delineated. Okay, so that's why it's such a nice design. Anyway, I don't want to talk too much about this because this is still an introductory Java sort of stuff. I don't want to throw too much at you too early. But there are, like I say, there are better ways to do things, and we're starting to talk about that now in this video. Okay, so all of the code I'm showing you in videos is, it's rudimentary, and it's showing you how to do things for the level of knowledge you might have at that moment. But as you advance, you'll be able to apply better techniques and better designs to your code. So that's all I'm saying. Okay, so hope you follow along with me, and we'll get started. So let's create a new class, and we'll call it, we'll just call it controller. I can't think of a name. Controller.java. Okay. And I'm doing this in TextPad, but if you want to work in NetBeans or any other editor, Visual Studio Code or any other editor, feel free. All of the code I'm showing you here will work in NetBeans or any other editor. Okay. Okay, it's all standard. I'm just working in TextPad because that's what my students use in the courses I teach. Okay, so let's open controller in here. Whoops. Here's our controller, public class controller. It's a bad name, but anyway, what does it matter? It's only a silly little project. Okay, so let's put a method in here. And what we'll do to get you started is we'll move across one of the ones we've already created. So our GUI at the moment is sort of a kitchen sink class. There's everything in there. There's stuff to build the GUI. There's stuff to add students into an array list. There's stuff to delete students from an array list. Let's now make this code a lot better. And we'll start by doing, we'll move this code here from our GUI class into our controller. Okay, so I've taken that code. So now our linked list and our edit index item is in our controller. Okay. And okay, now our controller class could be a static class, or it could be an instance class. I want to make mine a static class, so everything in here is static, so it's going to be static. So we've got one student linked list. That's what we're going to create. We're not going to create one for each controller we create. And we'll make that static data as well, so static edit index. Okay. And let's now move across the code for is student linked list. We can just move that straight across. Okay. Control X. And I'm going across to my controller, and I'm going Control V. Okay, so I'm just moving code across. Okay. Add student. Okay, let's move across add student. We'll take out some blank lines. I've got a lot of blank lines in here. Okay, so you can see add student is trying to reference parts of the GUI. Okay, so it's trying to look up the ID text field there. It's trying to look at the name text field and the ID text field here, and so on. And it's trying to access the GUI for centering dialogues. Okay, so you know, it's not really good. So what we might do is should we do the validation in here, or should we do the validation back in the main student GUI class? This is where you come onto as well, where I can't really show you enough just yet to help you here, but yeah, so what we can do is we can pass in a string, which is the ID, and a string, which is the name. Okay, and ID string, I might call them name string as well, just put str at the end. So we're not using ID text field anymore, we're using ID string and ID string. Okay, and we're not using the name field anymore, we're using the name string. So we're going to pass this data into the method. Okay, into the add student method. Okay, and then down here, we might just make that null for now. No, okay, no, I'll fix that as well. I'll show you how to fix that. Okay, so I'll show you how to fix that as well. And okay, so back over here in our main, we want to still have that add method because it's called from the button, remember? It's called here. So we still want to have the add student method. Okay, but now we want to call the one that's in our helper class. Okay, so it's a controller class. It's a static method. So we go class name dot add student, and we pass in the fields in the order they're needed, which is ID followed by name. Okay, so it's the ID text field dot get text, and the name text field dot get text. So you can see by doing this, we've shrunk our code in our GUI. We had this much code, and now we're just swapping it, so it's a one-line call to our controller class to add the student into the array list. Okay, so that's an.
You didn't even stop the lizard. You just wanted to.
Okay, let's go back to our GUI class and see what we can do next. So we've done delete student, we've done the add student. Look how our code shrunk down. We had a lot of code, and then we shrunk it all down into our GUI class. You know, what was 30 or 40 lines of code is moved to another class, and we just got one line there and just a few lines here. So not many at all. Okay. Now we've got the edit student. Okay, so this one here, we're checking the linked list size. If it's empty, we can't edit a student. If the student's not found, then we can't edit that student. Otherwise, we can, down here, we're getting the index of the student and setting various buttons to enabled or disabled, depending on whether the student ID was found or not. And then it's only when they click the edit and the button becomes enabled for the saving the changes, and that's when this code here runs. And then we update the student in the linked list. Okay, so we've got the two-step process. The user could click the edit button, type in changes, answer the phone, go to a meeting for an hour, come back and click the save button. Okay, so this code here is waiting for them to click the save button for their student. Okay, and that's when we update the linked list. So the linked list is now in our controller, so we can't do that here, and so on. And also this code here to find a student, we might be able to move that as well. So let's do that. So we'll take just this code here down to there, okay, just so you can see what I've taken. So I've taken the size, the student ID exists code, and the code that finds the student ID in the list. Okay, and then I've left in this code down here. So all the stuff to do with the GUI, I've left in the GUI class. Let's go across to the controller, and we'll paste this code in. And this is, I'm going to call this edit student. Yeah, that'll do. We'll leave that name. It's got to be a public method, otherwise we can't call it from the main, from the other class. It's got to be a static method because we're making all our methods static in our controller because we don't want to have multiple controllers. Same with the edit delete student, that's going to be static. Same with the add student, that's going to be static. And that one's going to be static as well. So all our methods are static and our data is static. Because we only want one, if we've got 500 students, we only want one controller class. We don't have many controller classes. And we never have 5 GUIs running at once, not on the one system. So, okay, so let's make all the methods static, make all our data static in our controller. And then we're at edit student here. So this is all fine. We're passing in the ID. So it's a bit like that, string ID. And now we're using ID down here. Okay, and then down here we're finding that student, so we're comparing it to that. We're not using the ID text field anymore. We're not using GUI components here now. We're just getting rid of the ID text field, .getText, and replacing it with the ID string because that's the ID getting passed in. Okay, and that's about all what we want to do there. Okay, so we probably want to make this. We want to signal back to the GUI class whether we're successful or not. So maybe we want to make that a Boolean method as well, and we'll do the same thing that we did above. Okay, so we'll have a result flag and set that to true when everything's fine. Okay, so down here in our edit student, if we find a student and we've got the edit index set right, then we'll set student found. And then return result. Okay, so that's it for our edit student. That's part 1, and then part 2 of the edit student is to do the actual saving back to the linked list when the user's finished editing. Okay, so let's do that. So now we've got the edit student in the controller class. We can call that now. So it's going to be it returns a boolean. So we're going to be have a similar sort of call as this. Boolean equals, and it's going to be edit student, and we're passing in the ID. Okay, so we're calling our controller class method edit student. Okay, edit student, which checks if the linked list is empty, checks whether the student is found in a linked list, and then goes through and stores the edit index, which is class data. There's the edit index there. Okay, so that's stored in class data, which means next time we call a method for the class, that value is still there whenever we need it, until something else changes it. Okay, and we've got the value of edit index, which say results true to say we found a student, and exit the loop early by violating that condition. Okay, so we can now go if result is equal to true. Then we don't want this anymore because this code's already been done. This code's already been done. Okay, so there's our edit method now. That's all we've got. Okay, so we call the controller method edit student, and if that returns true, the student was found, and the index is saved inside the class. There, we don't need to worry about saving that. That's saved inside the class, and then we can just set the various buttons to enabled or disabled depending on the results of that method. Okay. We need to do this as well. Okay. Okay, so how are we going to handle that? We need to, because edit index is part of our controller class now. So how do we do that? And linked list is part of our controller class, so we don't really want our GUI class to have access to controller class items. So what we might do is we might make a method called get editable student or something like that. So let's do that. And if the edit index is greater than or equal to 0, that means we've got a student that's being edited. And we could just go, and that's basically the code there we need. So that's basically the code. Okay, so if the current value of edit index is greater than or equal to 0, then we've got something that's inside the linked list. So then we can just return that code using the same code we have for linked list.getIndex.getName. Okay, and then otherwise we're just going to return blank string. Okay, so now we can call this method from our GUI class as well. Let's do that. So we're going to call that getEditedStudentName, and that's going to go in here. Okay. So we'll replace. I'll leave the old code there so you can see it. Okay, so the old code was looking up the linked list for that index and getting the name, but all that data now is in the controller class. Okay, so all we need to do is just call getEditedStudentName. We know the result's true, so we know edit index is greater than or equal to 0. So we can call that method there and get the name back for that student ID that was found inside the array list or linked list or whatever it is. Okay, it doesn't matter what the data structure is. Okay, don't need to worry about this one. This is all commented out code. Let's do the save student as well. So what we want to do now is pass the new student name and ID that we're editing across into the linked list, okay, or into the controller class to update the linked list. Okay. So we could have two methods. We could have a set name and a set ID, but we're doing it for a special case where it's on the edit index. So what we might do is set edited student ID and name, and we'll have a string, ID string. Okay, and we'll have a name, string, name, string, and okay, and it's going to be that same code, very similar code to what's there. In fact, that's the code we need. So we'll copy that, Control C, paste that in, and it's going to be void method. It could be a Boolean method if you like, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to make it a void. I'm not going to return anything. Okay, so if the index is greater than or equal to 0, we can update the details. So it's student linked list, which is the linked list inside this controller class now. .get edit index, which is the edit index, our private data at the top that we've already set inside that prior method. .set name to the name that was passed in, and set the ID to the ID that was passed in. Okay. So that's setting two fields. So it's like a power mutator. It's setting two fields at once. You can do it by two separate calls if you wanted to set name and set ID. Doesn't matter. Doesn't really matter. Okay. So now we need to call this. Method from our constructor, from our GUI class. GUI class, and we're replacing this code. Okay. So again, it's a call to the controller class. I'm going to say set the ID to the ID, pass in the ID for the ID, and pass in the name for the name. Got to make sure you pass them in the right order. If the method's expecting an ID and then a name, you've got to pass them in as an ID and a name, otherwise you get your data all twisted up. Okay, so there's the ID and the name. And we don't need those anymore. It's our old code. And all this code's fine. Nothing else changes here. That's all to do with GUI stuff. So that's all fine. Okay. So we're calling a controller class to do the work, to update the linked list, to edit the linked list, to change the linked list, to whatever. Okay. That's test data. Yep. And here we're calling the add student method as part of this class. That's fine. We've got an add student here as well as an add student there. That's fine. We're calling the one in this class here. That's fine. Display all's fine. That's relying on the linked list again. So what we might do there is make that a method inside our controller, and why not make it a toString? Good old toString. Override, because it's a higher class method. We're overriding public string toString. And we've got to spell string right. And so what we want to return is we want to return all the data in the linked list, separated by whatever, and one per line. It's just this code here, basically. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, now this is a controller method. It doesn't know about the text area. The GUI now doesn't know about the linked list. Okay, so we can't do that, and our controller doesn't know about the text area. So all we want to do is return a string. So let's do that. String out string is equal to blank. Okay, and then down here we'll say out string equals out string plus student plus /n. If you want to make it even clearer, you can go student.toString if you want to. You don't need to. When you're concatenating a student object onto existing string data, Java automatically looks for the toString method and calls it if it's available. So that's fine. That'll work anyway without that. We can take that out and it'll still work perfectly. Okay, so it's going to call that method anyway in the student class. And then we need to just return that at the end. Return out string. Okay. Now we want to make this a void, a static method. Okay. Because we want all our methods in our controller to be static. Just means we don't have to create an instance of the class and then call instance methods. Just makes it a little bit easier. So then we don't override anymore, because we're not overriding any method now that's in the parent class. We're overriding a static method. So there's no override there anymore. Okay, so we've got toString. That gives us a string of all our data in the array list. So we can display it in a text area or whatever. or a label or whatever. Okay, so over here we want to now call that method. Set text to, and it's going to be controller. So we're calling it a two-string method for the controller, which is this guy here. It's getting all the strings, all the students, converting them to strings, and then putting a /n after it, and bringing it all back in one big string of data, and we're just squirting all that data there straight into the text area. Okay, so this code here goes. Okay, so we get rid of this code. Delete. So again, we're shrinking our code down. The more processing code we put in our controller, we're shrinking the code in our GUI down. Okay, and why are we doing that again? It's to make our class designs more streamlined, and so that we can move our GUI onto a web server as a web app, or create a console app version of it, or create a Java app for your mobile phone, your Java mobile phone, or whatever. And the only code you need to change is the GUI code. The controller, the exception class, and the data class should all stay the same. Okay, there shouldn't be any changes, or minimal changes anyway, if there are changes. Okay, so we display all of that. We're almost finished. There's one thing we've got to do, and that's over here with our swing dialogues. We're displaying them for the center of that GUI class. So what we need to do is tell the controller class about our GUI class so it knows how to center the dialogues. Okay, so up here we'll create an object, static JFrame, JFrame, parent class, or parent JFrame, whatever you want to call it, and we'll have a method here called public void set parent. Static method. They're all static methods in our controller class for what we're doing at the moment. Okay, so we've got a method called setParent, and we're passing in a JFrame object, and we're setting our class field, which is this one, which is this.parent JFrame equal to the one that was passed in. So now we just need to call this somewhere inside our GUI class, early on before any methods are called in the controller. Let's do that. So up here in the constructor is probably best, and we'll probably just do that. Oh, doesn't matter. Let's do it here. To this, or if you like, to make it even clearer, let's use the class name as well, and it's controller dot. So we're calling it for the controller class. So we're setting the parent to that, so that we then use that to reference where the center of the GUI is. Okay. Okay. So now all those fields that refer to staff email GUI.this inside the controller now get changed to parent JFrame. Okay, parent JFrame, parent JFrame. There's another one. Control V, parent JFrame. There's another one. Control V, parent JFrame. Let's do a search and replace. Control H and replace, and the active document. Yep, and do a replace all. And I've replaced another 3. Okay, so this code should compile. Cool. This code should compile. Cool. This code should compile. Aha. So there's a bunch of stuff in here. So we don't know about linked lists. Let's start with that first one. Import java.util.linklist. Let's get rid of that one. We don't know about JFrames, so we need to bring in that as well. So import java x.swing.jframe. That'll take care of that one. That'll take care of the linked list. This.parent JFrame, yep. JOptionPane, we need to bring in a class of JOptionPane as well. So that's import JOption pane with a Java x.swing in front of it. Okay. Okay, so this problem here is because we've made this static. Okay, so let's make this called parent. I'll just call that parent there, because we don't with static objects or static classes or static fields, you don't have a this. So we'll leave that as parent name, and we'll just call that parent. That'll get around that. There's other ways to get around it. That's probably the simplest way. I don't want to overcomplicate things. Okay, so that's called parent JFrame. Parent JFrame equals parent. So we'll just change that there to be parent. Okay, and took off the this dot in front, because there's no this or static objects, because there is no current class object. Okay, display all. Okay, so, and name text field and so on. So we've got some data being used here. And again, this code here should only be, this should be in our GUI class, and it should only run if a student is added to the linked list. So again, let's add a result field. Let's make it a Boolean method. It was void, let's make it Boolean. And we'll have result equals false, student not added. Okay, so I've just added that field there at the top and made it a Boolean method. Okay, we want to say result equals true when the add's successful. And down here we want to return the result. So when the method exits, we'll return the result. And we want to move this code now back to our GUI class. So we'll go Control X on that and go across to our GUI class. And we're going to add that into add student. So we only want this code to run if add student returns true. Otherwise, we don't want this code to run. If the add's not successful, the user's got to have the opportunity to fix their data and whatever. Okay, so let's now Boolean result equals. So we're passing the data across to our add method in the controller class and getting the result. And if the result is true, then we want to do a display all and reset the input fields. Okay, so I'll just add this code here, and so I've added the Boolean result, and if result is true, and I've just pasted that code from the GUI class, controller class that shouldn't have been pasted over back into the GUI class, because the GUI class knows about the GUI, the controller class doesn't have any idea at all about the GUI, and that's the way it should be. Okay, it shouldn't care whether it's running as a console app or a Windows app or a web app or an Android app. It shouldn't care. Okay, so that's why the GUI handles the GUI. It's that responsibility thing I talked about earlier. Partitioning responsibility and assigning roles and responsibilities. Okay. There's an ID text field there that's still there. That should be ID. That should be ID there. Okay, just one. Okay. So Java's worried about us using the toString method. Okay, because it's a string in a method in the object class. It's worried about us using it there. So let's just call it as string. Okay, as string. Get data back as string. Whatever you want to call it, it's fine. That should be fine. And missing return statement. Return out string. Let's just check that. That's a void method. Doesn't have to return anything. That's a string method. That returns. Yep. There's a Boolean method that's returning a result, which is Boolean. That's fine. That's a Boolean method, and that's not returning a result. Okay, so return result. Okay, and that should fix that. Cool. So our controller's fine. And controller.addStudent. Oh, okay. So some of our methods might still be private. We've got to make them public so they're callable from outside the class. public. We don't need to make this one public because it's only used by methods inside this class. So that one's okay. Add student should be public. Delete student should be public. Anything that's called from the GUI has got to be public. Otherwise it can't call it. Edit student should be public. Yeah, that's public already. Finish off the editing's public. Set the edited student name and ID, that's public. And the as string's public. So that should be fine now. Yep. Okay, still got an error there. Get edited student name. Get edited student name. So let's have a look at our class. Okay. Get edited student name. Set editable student name. Get edited student name. So it's a controller class method. So we're going to have controller dot in front of it. Okay, to be able to call it controller. There we go, controller. One method left, and it's the as string one. So let's go dot as string. We changed it to as string, remember? There it is, as string. So we're going to call that as string method here in our display all. And that should be it. Everything should work fine now. Let's give it a go. Control 1, Control 2. Here's our GUI. I'll type in an ID and a name and click the add. Everything's fine. There's nothing in the console window giving me errors. There's no crashing going on. Let's type another ID, 33, and add a name. Click add. Another one, 99, and another name. Click add. Let's click delete, and I'll try and delete. Student ID is not in the database. We should probably say student ID can't be blank. There should be probably some more validation going on. Okay, but anyway. Let's type in number 99 and click delete. Okay, Bella's gone, so that worked fine. Let's type in 44 and click delete. Student ID is not in the database, that's correct. Let's do a display all. Yep, that's fine. Let's do an edit. Let's do an edit of 44. Student ID is not in the database. Let's do an edit of 33. Edit. And their details is Frankie. So now all the buttons are disabled apart from the save. That's right. And Frankie's real name is Frankie Jones. Okay, and let's click save. And there's Frankie Jones updated. Okay, so that's all working great. We've now split our class into a much cleaner design. Okay, so that we've got the GUI just handles the GUI, the controller class handles the array list or the linked list, and the methods that deal with the linked list. And we've got a data class which deals with just the data for one student. So we've got really nice responsibilities here, which means we can make it so that our class, our project can be changed to other platforms. We can have a GUI version, a web app version, an Android app version, and so on. Okay, with very minimal effort. Okay, so we've got this nice clear delineation of responsibilities, and much better way to go. Okay, let's do a display all. That's fine. Test data. Let's add some test data in, and we'll delete S111. Delete. It's all working great. Okay, so let's close that down. Okay, so that hopefully that answers Norsal's questions. I've created a class and a helper class, and I've got the GUI calling methods in that helper class to get work done, which is exactly what he was asking. They're also asking about the buttons. And look, the way I like activating buttons is I like doing it the Lambda way. Okay, so this is a great way to activate your buttons. Much shorter code. Whatever your button is, .add action listener, and then event followed by a minus and a greater than sign. That's a Lambda operation in Java, and then you can just name a method. So add student means whenever that button is clicked, you're going to call the add student method, which is this one. Okay, and whenever the display all button is clicked, you're going to call the display all method. Okay, which is this one down here. There it is, display all. So you're going to call that method. Okay, so it's a great way to link your buttons to methods so that things get called. You can go through the old-fashioned way of creating an action listener class and adding an action listener to your button as a new version of that class, but it's just so much more code. Just stick to the simpler way. Since Java 7, we've been able to use lambdas to link buttons to methods, and it's a much better way to go. So That answers all your questions, Norcell. I've created a new class. I've moved functionality into it so that we can call it from our GUI, and I've showed you how to wire up buttons in a nice, easy way. Okay, stay tuned, and I'll do another video. It's going to be another part because we're getting too long for this video, and we'll add file I/O in. Okay, so we didn't get to file I/O in this video because it got too long. Sorry about that. We had other topics to cover, but I'll do another video tonight, and I'll upload that as well with file I/O, so saving and loading data to file. Okay. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.